You know, that kind of led me to, I've been working on this book for about 15 years and we finally just finished it. And, really to share inspiration and stories and how kind of from personal action to building towards collective action, towards more ecosystem scale transformation in our communities, and doing a lot of kind of next level grassroots work and coalitions and networks in that. But it does all come back to each one of us finding where our heart's inspiration meets the hurt that we're called to heal. There's always problems in life. What are the problems we're tackling that you're called to tackle? And how do we kind of keep our own spirit engaged and sustained in this work? So that's a little bit. And like I mentioned, I've been growing Daily Acts. I started it right after 9/11, and my mom died. And so, like 22 years ago. And we're now, our budget this year, we're sending our budget to the board next week, is we were at like 1.3 million last year. And then we are in the process of getting two big state water grants that are multi-year grants for about $6 million. And so a lot of complicated growth coming up, a lot of leadership challenges, but our budget will be probably 2.5 million next year. And we have around 15 staff. We're down a few positions, but we'll be up to about 20 staff, and then trying to move a lot more resources out into the community. And so we've grown, steadily from like when I was working with Stuart, like 20 grand, 40 grand, 80 grand, and have applied a lot of different strategies along the way. But being able to mobilize a lot of volunteers and hire good people, hire young folks coming in, hire leaders of color to be able to do this work and build skills and capacity is something we need a lot more. We will always need volunteers. And to really scale this work and affect culture change and policy change and all of this, we have to have organizational movement capacity. We have to fund training people. We have to be able to, pay people to learn how to do equity trainings. And there's so much that we're doing. It won't all be solved by money, but we got to move some of that money from that system into our work. So that's something I'm super passionate about. So that, I don't need to talk about the macro context at all. I think you all probably know it better than me, but a lot of difficulty we're facing. It's only getting more complicated. In the last 5 years, you've probably seen Northern California. We were the first place that got hit with kind of the mega fires in 2017 when it burned down Santa Rosa overnight, just about. And we've been in crisis response, record fire, record drought, record flood, pandemic, climate emergency, for the last 5 to 7 years. It's been going on longer than that. And, there's been a lot of challenges in that, but, I'll share a little later. There's been a lot of really phenomenally amazing things of turning a crisis into an opportunity for bigger change. So we've had a lot of good successes. But I'd like to go back to Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed last year, who's kind of the founder of engaged Buddhism, has this quote where he talks about the most powerful thing we could do to take care of the future is to sit skillfully with the present moment. So Daily X starts all of our staff meetings in the middle of firestorms. I've had fire chiefs and agencies and leaders meditate together. Stuart, I remember back in the day, he's getting elected officials and government in California, the folks who passed the first community choice aggregation in Marin, Supervisor Charles McGlashan, getting his staff to meditate. And so bringing it, certainly to these circles, but like we're getting our agency people to kind of pause and breathe and orient, because that's how we could think best together. So anybody who's open and interested, if you want to close or lower your eyes, I'd love just to take a couple minutes and just kind of land together. And if you want to stretch or do something else, whatever gets you most present. And you could get your feet flat on the ground and sit upright and let your shoulders relax. And just take a nice, long, slow breath in through your nose. Have it fill your chest and fill that air in your body. And then just do a long, slow, gentle exhale. You could blow the exhale across your lips, which engages your parasympathetic nervous system, which further relaxes you. And just like the ocean washing up on the shore and receding, just take a few breaths to land in your body, land in this moment. Bring all your threads of attention to right here. And just notice if you have any sore, stuck spots physically or emotionally, if there's any lingering threads, arguments, anger, whatever it is that just observe, notice it. We don't have to fix it. Just create some spaciousness around it. I've been amazed to see the difference a 3-minute meditation makes to our very busy board of directors that are running organizations and doing things just so we could think well together. Same for our staff. And now here on the 10th day of January, the start of another cycle around the sun. This is a really a powerful moment. As we all know, it's a powerful year and decade that we have ahead of us, climate-wise. And so think about something you're excited about in the new year. Maybe something or someone you're feeling grateful for. Just imagine you have one of Trace's dry wells in your body and you're letting that gratitude and excitement sink deep into you and move through each of your pores, move through your system. And then when you're ready, go ahead and bring your attention back. Do a little hand rub, maybe a little shake, something we frequently do in programs, organizationally. So shaking the dust off our shine. There's a lot of crazy stuff that sticks to us these days. Crazy politics, painful climate issues, challenging interactions when we're trying to do good work with well-intentioned people. So shaking the dust off your shine. Stuart, before we dive in, do you have those little polls teed up?
I do. I don't have the capacity to do the poll, but I can put them in the chat.
Well, this is a small enough group. I could just do a little hand raise, although people could put in chat if you're not showing your picture. A couple
Okay.
things I just want to know, just to check in with you all, of 2 questions. Like, how are you right now as a human being, aware of the things you're aware of going through? Are you feeling inspired and empowered and clear on what you're here to contribute in this big planetary moment, just engaged in it? Are you not thriving, but hanging in there? Are you feeling burnt out, overloaded, or overly stressed? Something else? So who here is feeling inspired, empowered, clear on what you're here to contribute, and just step into it and doing the work? Raise your hand. Nice.
Liz Miller says 3. I'm not sure what 3 is. Maybe
3
that's
is feeling burnt out, overloaded,
okay.
overly stressed.
Okay.
So that's the first one. So how about not thriving, but hanging in there, getting by, treading water?
Richard says yes to all 4.
I know, totally. There's the other end, all of it. And
Okay.
then, a little too crispy, a little burnout, been working on the issues, grinding for a long time. It's a lot of difficult stuff to metabolize in our systems.
Dan says, let's see, not thriving, but hanging in there. Janice says, I am, but I am mindful of burning out. Okay, so she's not burned out, but she's mindful of that risk. Dwayne says, feeling empowered. Listen to this one, empowered and insufficient.
And then, yeah, that's good.
Go ahead. I'll read the others after you say.
Perfect. The next question is, what scale has the most attention for you as far as your greatest concern or difficulty, where you're really concerned about things or things just feel difficult? Is that at the personal scale, yourself, your own health and well-being, and your mind and body? Is it at the scale of your family and your loved ones? A lot of people in our lives are struggling. People are going through a lot of stuff. Is it at the scale of your organization? Being in grassroots, volunteer, leading, like, it is hard work doing this work with other well-intentioned people. Is it the scale of your community, state of the world? All of them. So self, loved ones, organizational scale, call it, or group, community, world, all of it. So who hears more in the self, like where you're feeling the most challenges personally, just as a human right now?
Richard says self and community. Dan says all of it. Millie says state of the world. Maybe I'm jumping ahead.
No, that's perfect. This is good.
Yeah.
Keep it going.
Yeah, Jennifer says my biggest challenge is with my loved ones.
With what, sorry?
My loved ones.
Loved ones, yeah.
Yeah. All of it, says Liz. Jana, community and world.
Right. So we're getting impacted. And often if we're trying to affect systemic transformation, we have to work at a lot of scales all at the same time. We have to work on the scale of our state of being. We have to work at the scale of our home and garden, our neighborhood, our organizations, our cities, our regions, all the way up. We have to partner with each other in other places, learning from what Sustainable Tucson's doing. How can our lessons learned be supportive of you, and vice versa? It's a lot of complex, it's really rich to live and be at all those scales, but it's also complicated, right? And it means a lot of stressors come in. So thank you for sharing that. That is
Two more.
two more. Great. Yeah.
Well, David said all of it, though the state of the world and country are very high on his mind, and said something of a different sort of flavor, grateful to be alive in the full experience of interbeing.
Sounds like the Thich Nhat Hanh I was reading last night. I like that.
Yeah, she's a student. Dwayne says, I used to be connected internationally, but won't fly anymore. Some of us have probably made that decision too. Trace said organization, community. Millie says, here to Anne's comment. The full experience of interbeing. Grateful for that.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing. Hopefully in our brief time together, you could find something that speaks to you at each of the scales. I definitely think we have to work, you got to choose which ones you're going to work at. But, to me, we have to try and affect change at a lot of different scales at the same time, and to do so in a way that we stay sane and take care of ourselves and our families and all that. The thing I love about reverence, so I'm going to start framing up the book and some of our stories in that. The book is written, there's 4 main sections to it. And I could show you a picture, has, I think, even that garden, it's not going to show up. Anyways, there's 4 sections: reverence, ripples, relationship, and resilience. And the quote a few years into Daily Acts, when I was struggling with growing a volunteer-based organization, that stuck with me, is the words of Deng Ming Dao, who defined reverence as the stately determination to make something worthy of the materials in the moment. And I love it because we often think of like reverence could be, a sense of awe, but this like stately determination to make something worthy of the materials in the moment. And the materials in the moment are all those scales, like how's the state of my being? How am I connected to my home, garden, my community, the wider movement? And so I love that as a lived in, heart-centered, awestruck intention of how do I show up and make something worthy of the materials in the moment? And so these are the 4 R's of the book are also Daily Acts organization's 4 core operating values and principles. And the structure of the book flows through, it tells a lot of stories. And at the end of each section, it, defines some concepts and some key points, and then lays out questions at the personal or organizational scale. And so reverence has been the 4 R's, reverence, ripples, relationship, and resilience, have been a really helpful framework for me and for us. Again, a sequential framework for how you could apply, take heart, take action, do so in right relation, rinse and repeat. And that's how you build resilience at the personal scale, to how do we take heart and define the action we need to take together, and do that in right relation in our organizations, in our communities, in our ecosystems. So that's kind of the structure and flow of the book, and a little bit of how I'll structure the talk. And, reverence is also like waking up to the beauty and the hurt in our lives and our world, not closing down to the heartbreak, but again, finding that spot where our heart's inspiration meets the hurt that we are called to heal. It gets more complicated when we try and do this in groups and organizations and change cities. But I think a lot of these things can apply the same. So once you kind of wake up and you discover your reference points and, let your heart break and lean into those spots, then ripples in particular is around, we define around 3 things of taking action to live your vision and your values, whatever that means for you, whatever scale. Finding your voice is really important. You could be a shy or quiet person, or you could be a charismatic speaker, whatever it is, but finding our voice and being a voice for the larger purpose that seeks to move through us is phenomenally powerful. It's honestly at the heart of what's kept me going and why Daily Acts, finding our collective voice, has been able to affect such wide change and partner with dozens and even hundreds of organizations and agencies and coalitions and mobilize tens of thousands of actions and projects. So from the reverence to the ripples of taking action, so finding, taking action, finding our voice, and then crafting a compass. And a compass, like I have a whole structure and layout of what it is in the book, but it's essentially surrounding yourself with what helps you re-inspire and recenter you. What's your true north? And, kind of 3 main parts to it of like, what's your true north, your passion, your purpose, your vision, your strengths, you as a human. And then what are the tools and practices that help you recenter on that true north? And then what are the systems and tools that, like it could be weekly planning, monthly planning, perfect time. We just closed a year and we're starting a year. Do you do a solid audit personally or organizationally? What worked, what didn't, what am I focused on? Where do I need to lean in? And then relationships is a 3rd bucket. You all probably heard the quote by Fritjof Capra that I love, of nature sustains the web of life by creating and nurturing community. When I heard that a few years into Daily Acts, I'm like, oh, wow, that's an operating principle. Just a very simple call to action, nurture community, at all scales. And then in our work, resilience building is a constant ongoing thing of taking heart and taking action and doing it in right relation. So those are sort of the 4 R's of how we frame out. And, I'd say I think probably a lot of you have it, but it's such a topsy-turvy world, and it's getting even more so. Famed leadership author Jim Collins, who's the best-selling leadership author of all time, wrote a book like 12 years ago or so called Great by Choice. And the tagline really grabbed me: chaos, uncertainty, and luck, why some thrive despite them all. And he lays out these different set of operating instructions that different agencies or organizations and businesses have used. But his main thing was of trying to operate without a compass, personally or organizationally. A really good compass that's adapted, is like being blind in a snowstorm. And we need this, and we need to, just the amount of chaos and change that's happened just in the last few years. It's not like you create the compass once and you're like, oh, sweet, we're good. Organizationally, we're constantly having to reassess and reevaluate and adapt and affect a lot of change. And so we need to do that at the personal scale as well as at the organizational scale. But I'd love to just pause for a minute and have you each, and you could journal or just reflect briefly of, are you currently clear and working on the part that breaks your heart and inspires you? Like, who are your reference points? The people or groups or whatever it is that's like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's what I want to be when I grow up. My version of that. What keeps you going?
How do you want us to answer that?
I think for purpose of a very short time together, I would say I'd love to hear it all if we had like an hour and a half or so. But I think just for like, your start of the year personal compass check-in, I journal a lot. I write things down. So if people want to put things in the chat, that's awesome as well, just to share so people could see. Brad is totally one of my reference points. I love it. Funny side note, when Brad's come out here, we brought him out here to do talks for our agencies, and we kind of amp him up even further. We're like, all right, Brad, this is a pretty sophisticated ecosystem. We got Brock and OAC. We got all these groups here. You need to take it to the next level. And he has definitely taken his work to the next level over the years. Every morning in my meditation, part of what I do is I go through all my reference points. I sit down on my stool and I have tea and I stretch, I meditate, and I release the things I'm vexed with, and I draw on the things I'm blessed with, and center on purpose and vision and values. And I call in my mom, dad, Gandhi, Che, MLK, Brock, Dolman, Brad Lancaster, Kenny Osbel from Bioneers, Nina Simons, just, like a dozen different people, constantly just trying to surround myself with my reference points. Like, what is it? Your reference points could be a loved one, a grandmother, it could be a fictional character. What are the values? What are the characteristics? What are what is it about them that inspires you? Because when we keep on surrounding ourselves with what inspires us and re-energizes us, it's a powerful resetter. The 5 most powerful intrinsic motivators in humans are having a curiosity and learning, and then moving your learning into passion, and then moving your passion into purpose, and then having a sense of autonomy, being able to take action, and a sense of mastery, getting better at things. And so a lot of what's throughout the book and throughout our work is, how do we stack these intrinsic motivators so they could override all the shit that overwhelms us and and gets us buried and not wanting to get out of bed,
Millie wrote, Sir David Attenborough, Thich Nhat Hanh, The Real Organic Project, and Bioneers, speaking of Nina and
yeah.
Jenny. Yeah.
Stuart, I like your colleague. That is good to be in cahoots with people that are your reference points.
Yeah.
And then, so in the reverence, and I think sometimes our hearts get so broken in this work and so overloaded that we close down and we're not able to work as effectively together. And so, for me and for us in our world, even at an organization scale, even with 15 staff and a lot of complexity in it, we still center back into these values and operating principles. And so, just encourage folks, like, recenter, who your inspirations are and your reference points, spending more time rubbing up against and being surrounded by those things are incredibly powerful. So when I started Daily Acts, what kind of got me going, just in brief, was I was waking up to how overwhelming everything was, the state of our social and environmental issues. And then I got exposed to this group of herbalists at the United Plant Savers Sanctuary. And I discovered this thing called permaculture. And I went to the Bioneers Network and was there with thousands of change makers. And I was like, hold on, I'm totally overwhelmed by what's going on. These people are crystal clear on what's going on. And I didn't even have words like presence and purpose and all that stuff yet, but I was like, what in hell's in their Wheaties? Like, what is going on that they are so clear and so inspired, and they're regenerating everything, and they're aware of the issues. So that was kind of what hooked me. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I need more of it. And then I stepped into this garden at the Permaculture Institute in Northern California. I know David knows Penny and James, and it looked like my garden, but even more. And I walked through this gate, and it was just this thriving, fecund, regenerated ecosystem. And I'd been exposed to like transformed forest and going to Belize and studying agroforestry research and things, and cultures that were still more intact with the land. And then I walk into this garden and have this awareness of like, oh my God, you could regenerate our core connections to self, nature, community, all in a simple garden in a backyard. And so it totally rewired my understanding of what's possible. And then those reference points, getting exposed to essentially transformed people, the Brock Dolmans, the Brad Lancasters of the world, the David Eisenbergs, and transformed places, gardens and forests and farms. And then something like Bioneers, where you have a network of networks, you have a community of change makers. And so those became the 3 core reference points to found Daily Acts organization. And we started with a simple little black and white zine, using my voice to try and inspire others. And we started with a sustainability tour. And that went from going from educating people to then a point hit and was like, okay, well, In 2009, we installed the first public food forest in our neighborhood, and we had 150 people show up over 3 days. It melted the city's mind. They just wanted us to save water by ripping out the turf and taking it to the landfill, where it become about 60 times the amount of greenhouse gas emissions as methane gas. We're like, no, 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 no. Let's build soil the way nature does. Let's sheet mulch it. Let's dig swales. Let's put in catchment. Let's get everyday landscape designers to start working with volunteers. And the head of the water department came down. It was 80 degrees. We had a bunch of elders digging swales, transforming this landscape. And he was just confused. He's like, hold on, these people are like having a crazy good time. They're laughing, they're muddy, and they're saving the city water, and they're saving the city money, and they're growing food, and they're doing all this other stuff. 10 years later, when there's a new state stormwater law, and agencies all over the state have no new money to address stormwater, and we're like, well, yeah, we started doing that 10 years ago. We were digging swales for you. So we've already been doing your rainwater, because you think in an integrated, holistic way, right? We've had a friend who created a carbon calculator, do a sequestration analysis on it. We still have to look at the numbers of what that scales out across our city, but it's sequestering a huge amount of carbon. It's growing community food. We've had people have their first dates, have gone on to get married there, all kinds of amazing. It's just become this regenerated landscape. People go and harvest their medicine. You get like 50 pounds of elderberries hitting at once, and dozens of community members are going harvesting elderberry for medicine. And since then, we've installed, I think, 37 of these similar landscapes. We've used them to shift city policy to then scale out sheet mulching, to go from one garden sheet mulched to over 500 lawns being sheet mulched and saving 20 million gallons of water a year, not to mention supporting local businesses, sequestering carbon, doing all this other stuff. And so we've done a lot with going from one gray water system, first permitted gray water system in Sonoma County, mimicking a wetland, mimicking an ecological process, right? Like mimicking a food forest, mimicking a wetland, to then doing 5 gray water systems in our neighborhood, to doing 13 in 2 cities in a weekend, to doing 100 gray water system challenge, to working with Art Ludwig and others and changing state policy, from the grassroots, basically, and then going back and working to help our cities develop programs. So from one gray water system to dozens and more, from one lawn sheet mulch to hundreds in one city, and then shifting how the rest of the cities in the county do their cash for grass programs or their turf removal programs. So we've done a lot of going from education to application to transformation. And it's all been largely community powered, working with agencies, working with grassroots groups, working with businesses. And it's just amazing the buy-in that starts to build. We've had volunteers help us, a volunteer landscaper help us install one of our food forests, and he shows up, and then some people want to hire him. We've had people build their businesses, their landscape businesses, off volunteering at installing our food forests. We've had people go on a tour of our garden and drop $130K at a local green landscape firm on doing a massive landscape installation. We've never been able to run the calculations on the amount of financial benefit it's created, but it's been a lot over the years. And so we started small. And then
I am terribly sorry to interrupt, but if you look in the chat, there's a very inappropriate message. I feel like we should do something about that. Like, that should not be tolerated here.
Oh, I wonder if someone's spam
Yeah.
bot, I guess.
Yeah, that's probably what it is.
Okay,
But are
I
we
think
able
we
to just
can-
kick them?
I think so. Let me find out.
All right.
Okay.
Looks like it's Joyce.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Well, go ahead, continue, Trathen. We'll take care.
Yeah. Oh, that's a bummer. I'm sorry to see that. Thank you for catching it, though.
Yeah, no problem.
And so, but just starting small, and it's amazing. We went from one garden to a bigger garden, to then going like, oh, wow, can we mobilize on 350.org's first day of global climate?
I'm about to interrupt here.
Oh, yeah.
It's and Joyce in the chat said that she didn't send that, but she clearly did, because it said Joyce in that message. So I'm really confused, because
Okay.
she
Austin?
apparently Joyce claims to not, but
Yeah. Austin, let's just, let's let Trathen go on, and we'll manage what we can from behind the scenes. And
Oh,
Joyce, we'll
all
appreciate
right,
if
thank you,
just
thank
stay.
you.
Yeah, so Joyce, just leave those kind of notes alone for now, would you please? Thank you, Trace. I'll keep trying to do this. And Trathen, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Just, kind of power of small. We went from one garden to a slightly bigger garden to then mobilizing 250 volunteers to transform a city hall landscape in a single day, saving 1 million gallons of water, saving the city $60,000 in installation costs, growing food, medicine, habitat, installing catchment. We've since done 3 city halls. We went from that to then said, well, what if we could plant, someone's hacking multiple of them, it looks like. I wonder how
Yeah,
that's.
there's no way that both people are trying to send those messages. Yeah, Liz Miller just said that wasn't her. I feel like someone's somehow hacking the chat to make it look like people are sending
Yeah.
inappropriate messages.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to do about that.
Let's just ignore them and
Ignore it,
have our
yeah.
presentation.
I think ignore it.
All
There's
right, I
plenty
mean,
of
yeah, if we don't
distractions.
give them a response, they'll probably stop and move on with their life eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't give a reaction next time, Ethan. They
All right.
probably won't. They'll probably just like, I don't know, stop.
Fade away. Yeah.
Okay.
Good point. You could disable the chat. Yeah. And so it's been amazing to me seeing the power of small to then go from a small garden to a bigger garden to a really big public garden. And that pushed another city to transform their city hall. And then we came up with the idea of planting 350 gardens in a weekend, which seemed like an insane goal to us. Like it scared us to even say it. 6 months after we did the big city hall garden, and with just 3 months of organizing, we got over 40 schools, churches, organizations, and agencies to mobilize. And we planted and revitalized 629 gardens in a single weekend. And then we kept on doubling and doubling and doubling and doubling and made it into this community resilience challenge and registered over 100,000 actions and projects to grow food, save water, reduce energy use, reduce waste over the next near decade. And so just I kept on being amazed by the power of the community to mobilize, and we increased the complexity we were able to work with. We built skills in our organization of how to collaborate more widely. And then that built into doing coalition work. And then in the 2015 drought, same drought we're in now, we partnered with a disadvantaged youth crew and a number of agencies. And the youth crew transformed 30 lawns in 30 days, saving 750,000 gallons of water. Then we partnered with a commercial landscape firm and we did mulch stock and we transformed, was it 60,000 square feet of turf in a day? No, 25,000 square feet of turf in a day, saved, 1.5 million gallons of water. We had bands, we had massage tables. And so we've been just finding these unlikely partners and continuing to mobilize bigger and bigger. Then when the fires hit, because we work in such a networked way, we're a small organization. Most of this, the things I just said, was when we had 0 to 2 staff or 3 staff part-time. So we didn't, it wasn't the 10 or 15 people we have now. There's a lot of community power, and especially for probably volunteer groups like you all, like how do we leverage our networks to work with local business, local organizations, work with agencies to affect bigger change? And then how do we start to move that into coalition work? And so when the fires hit in 2017, we helped launch a number of new initiatives around watershed restoration. We launched a grassroots Just Resilience Collaborative, which raised over $300,000 to give to farm workers and small farmers and grassroots groups, and just kept on mobilizing in response to crises and getting people together and going like, okay, how do we need to innovate and adapt now? And that led up to in 2019, when the climate emergency was hitting really strongly, we co-founded a group called Climate Action Petaluma. And even in Sonoma County, where we have a lot of more sustainable agencies and focus, it was astonishing that nobody was treating the climate emergency like it was a climate emergency. And that was when Sunrise was hitting and Greta was hitting and a lot of things were starting to go. And so we formed this coalition and we mobilized a bunch of people and we showed up outside of our city hall planning session. And we got our city to declare climate emergency, to be the first city in the county to declare climate emergency. We then mobilized and worked with the county and other agencies, and collectively with other grassroots groups, flipped the whole county and became the first county in the country to have all municipal jurisdictions declare climate emergency. At the same time, when we asked our city, we said, well, declare climate emergency, create a new climate commission or climate body. And so then the city founded a new climate commission that we mobilized and got a lot of great people on it. 2 leaders of color, some youth, a range of ecological experts. And so we got this new Brown Act body created. And the next year, right when the pandemic was hitting, because we've been building this agency, because we've been working in collaboration with our city in this tactical way to building public and political will, but not a finger pointing sort of way. We then, about 24 volunteers, Daily X led a few different teams, and we had a bunch of other groups play a role. The community wrote a 50-page climate emergency framework that was then adopted and is now the city's North Star. It's the city's guiding document, a climate framework that was literally written by the community. It had to go through, city staff and that to get cleaned up. And, since then, it's been amazing to see what's possible. So our city council then, more momentum, helped to have that. A former staff of ours got elected, who'd been through our leadership program, been through our permaculture program. She put up a vote to ban gas stations in our city, and we became the first city in the country, and I think the world, to ban new gas stations. And now that started a movement that's rippling around the country. And we already have over half of our municipalities just in Sonoma County that have banned new gas stations. And it's just kicked off this cascade. More people are getting on commissions. New people are running over for council. We flipped our council even further to be more progressive. We've had a group start up to plant 10,000 trees and to work on safe streets. We've had a cool Petaluma group start that won a top award in the whole state for doing a green climate challenge. And so it's been amazing. Just like, Stuart said about our garden, the garden behind us, you get the right design elements in place and you plant a number of things, and it just starts to become this regenerative ecosystem. And it starts to build and regenerate, and more connections come in and more niches fill in. And, don't get me wrong, there's a ton of challenges on working all this out. It's not perfect by any means. And leadership is phenomenally difficult in the grassroots, whether paid or volunteer. But it's been amazing to get to see what's possible, that we could actually flip the culture of our agencies even. Like I'm literally for the last 3 years, like eating popcorn, watching the climate commissions once a month, and watching the culture change in organizations, in how we work together in the community. And it's just a kind of an incredibly powerful thing that's possible. And this is all through the power of small groups, through organizations like Daily Acts, through coalitions that organizations have come together to form. And then other groups start to build excitement and move in and find their niche, whether it's planting trees or working on bikes or whatever it may be. It could be dry wells. But so that's kind of, I'll pause there. It's a lot of words and there's other things. I definitely want to leave some space for conversation. But, now if I look at, like, we work with about 100 different organizations and agencies a year. It's a phenomenal amount of complexity that enables us to kind of take this ecosystem approach. But it goes back to working on ourselves. Are we aligned with our inspiration? Are we clear on our part? Are we, because we have to work. Touch my truck. The next level.
I'm trying to disable chat, but
You can also mute everybody.
Yeah, that's another option.
Don't mute Trathen.
Well, I'm wrapping up, but just to kind of pulling back to, it's like a phenomenally difficult time that we live in, and it can be hard to sustain in this work personally. It's hard to work in volunteer-based groups and organizations. It's hard to do coalition building. It's hard to change how our communities work. But there's also a phenomenal amount of change that's happening. It's such an incredibly rare and ripe moment. And the main thing I just want to say is like to like encourage you all to, I think we all need, I need the reminder myself to deepen in on the self-care and practice and what gets you lit and sustained. And how do we help our groups be more effective, and how do we act more as ecosystem catalysts where we could get a lot of other players in our communities to drive change together? Everything we've done has been collaborative. I could share a zillion more stories, and it's all through collaboration. But that requires working at those different range of scales. So I think plenty more I could say, but I'm mindful. Like I want to hear from you all, questions, thoughts, ideas. I just threw a lot of words at you, but yeah, I'll just pause there. Just thanks for having me here tonight, and happy to chat or chew on things or see if there's any comments or questions that people have or clarifications. Since I said a lot quickly.
Trathen, maybe the best way to go would be if a person would raise their hand. I think the person who was doing some odd work on the side has left, but since we're not sure, if you could raise your hand and then I'll ask you to unmute. And let's see, I've got to organize this so I can see everybody. Okay, great. I think a few people are pausing and contemplating.
Yeah.
Jennifer, you're smiling. I just wonder if you have something you wanted to share. You'll have to unmute.
Hi. Sure. I'm very excited to hear everything that's been talked about tonight, and how challenging, but how also rewarding it is to just kind of take an idea and run with it and see what kind of help you get. I became impassioned with leading a whole food plant-based lifestyle about 8 years ago, and not only the personal health benefits that it reaps, but also the environmental effects, positive environmental effects, and kindness to animals. So I started producing YouTube videos. Each YouTube video focuses on the one aspect of how to live this lifestyle. And they're all about 10 minutes long. And I got a friend to do it with me, and we've just launched them. And, it's been kind of a little daunting. I'm thinking, okay, now what do I do? But people enjoy them, and if they get a little bit of support and can eat one less bit of meat next week and start thinking that, wow, maybe it's possible to eat without, eating meat and dairy and eggs. It's important for all of us. And I texted in the chat earlier before all the other stuff that my loved ones were the biggest challenge for me. I'm really concerned about the future of the planet for my kids, who are, in their early 30s. And, what's it going to look like? Not only in 20 years, but, next month for us. We just don't know what's around the corner. And so, yeah, that's my bit. It's the thing that really that grabbed me quite a few years ago. And as soon as I realized how important it was, I just was like, oh my God, I've got to spread this. So I've been volunteering and working in it since then.
Nice. Yeah, that's just doing that. What's the part that grabs you,
Yeah. I saw Forks Over Knives when it came out, and it was like, okay, well, that's huge. That's personal health mostly. But then I saw the documentary Cowspiracy, and the corruption in the animal agriculture industry and the horrible negative effects of animal agriculture on the planet. And I just thought, oh my God, I can't not do something. So what you're doing, same thing. It's like, we can't not do something. We got to do whatever we can and spread the word.
I love it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that inspired effort. Wayne, did you want to share something?
I think I'll wait. I want to hear from some others first. I might have something to share if I let it percolate a little bit more.
Okay.
Silence is good too.
I have a question, if that's all right.
Please.
So your organization grew tremendously. I don't know how many years it took to grow it. I wonder how many people that are involved now are people that were aligned from the beginning and just happy to have found your organization or be found by you, and of the same mindset, and so therefore eager to join. Or if you feel like you were able to actually change people's minds. I think that is the hardest struggle that I have. I actually similarly am a whole foods plant-based person. Love forks over knives. I have dear friends who know that I am, and they are adjusting so that when they serve me food, they try to buy organic, which I think is fantastic, but they don't do it themselves. And I keep thinking, if I have dear friends that I can't even convince, how am I going to convince the larger community of anything? Food, environment, watershed management, anything like that. So if you have any advice on how to change minds successfully, because I know it's really hard, and you don't want to be a bull in a china shop and, be at all pushy or forcing or obtrusive, but on the other hand, I think we're all here to kind of help try to change minds.
Yeah, it's definitely a humbling thing, especially loved ones in that. I mean, we've seen over years watching family members, I thought we'd, fighting over politics in the holidays, to then food foresting their whole yard. And so I've seen positive change through time, but it feels, yeah, everybody around you, it's like they're maybe not living the values to the degree that you'd want them to, even if they have the resources and all these things. So I think, I don't think we could really change anybody, honestly, even though we've enabled and supported a lot of people to change and shifted policies and had a big impact. Like, people have to want to change. And so we tend to work, kind of go where the water flows to a degree. There are certain times where we push hard on the political will, like declare climate emergency at city scale policy. And we use the political will piece for sure. But we, like, with a lot of what enables us to move through is the collaboration and like working the inside outside levers. We work with people in all parts of the system, and how do we just work with people tactfully to move systems versus just the individual scale change. So it's not an easy answer on that. And I think, just like, at least for me and for us, we work in a lot of different ways. Like you're saying, early on, it was sort of like the true believers would show up. But now we have equity-based work. Like we have tonight, Petaluma Equitable Climate Action Coalition that we foster in our training. It's 6 young leaders of color, which are very different culture and value and belief set than maybe other people in our organization. So as we've been able to grow, we have a lot of different parts of the work. We have the people who are deep in the sustainability. We have people who are deep in water. We have people who are deep on the climate or climate justice push. We have folks who are deep on equity. Transformation is their priority. So kind of like the garden, we have this more robust ecosystem, and there's common values under it, but there's also different values. And just, yeah, I don't know. I think we've all probably been dealing with that, but like, I don't know that it's helpful to be frustrated by the people in our lives that we can't change. I got a bunch of them too, trust me. I just spent the weekend with one, and I'm like, God, you have so much wisdom. You're such a great business leader. You have all these resources, and I would love you to be and do differently. And so I kind of like plant plant seeds where the soil is fertile, and you can plant them anywhere, but I put more of our attention in how can we drive bigger, more transformative change, kind of the coalition of the willing. But I've also found through time, like it's not just 5 or 10 of us, like we've mobilized tons of people, we've changed policies, we've flipped our cities. And so if you start small and build and build and build and build and build and bring in some more partners, even with that coalition of the willing, you could affect a lot of change. And then finding common values is another piece. Like are there justice groups in your area that are maybe a different orientation where you could find overlap? Because building power together, it's more complicated for coalition building, but it's a way to affect that we found to affect greater change. We partner with a lot of unlikely allies, commercial real estate, So long-winded. I don't know that answers questions answerable, but
That was great. Thank you.
yeah.
David,
So this is great to hear what you've been doing, and it's amazing and fabulous. I wanted to share a few thoughts about where some of our work has gotten traction. When we started working with trying to change building codes, it seemed like an incredibly adversarial realm to be working in. One of my early revelations was that I actually wanted what building officials wanted and more, not less, because I didn't want people building unsafe buildings, but I was looking at this whole range of other hazards attributable to the built environment that were outside the scope, outside the view, the field of view of what code officials were looking at. And so the work eventually became kind of, I had a dream actually that provided some insights in how to do some of this work. One was that I was like flying, like codes were like a train on a track, and the building officials were the crew on the train. And I was flying in a sailplane actually, but in the same basic direction, but with a much bigger field of view, including being able to see where the trestle, the bridge was out up ahead. And the work basically in my mind became inviting them up to see what I was seeing, not making them wrong, not making them bad, just saying you're not seeing the whole picture. And I had another dream, which I woke up with this concept and phrase in my mind. The phrase was path of commitment. And the concept was that when you're trying to influence people, that you should map out their path of commitment. Like, what do they care about? What are they trying to accomplish? What are they committed to? And then map yours over that. And if there's authentic overlap or an intersection, then construct your engagement with them as close to the center of their path of commitment as you authentically can. It's sort of a dynamic version of seeking common ground, but it's really looking for what things you're both committed to accomplishing, and thinking about why, like, why do they care about the things that they care about, and why do I care about and so it's kind of a way of thinking about finding collaborative opportunities that at first you can't imagine might exist. And so you can find yourself with allies where you were expecting adversaries. And a lot of times it takes time. It takes finding the right way to communicate with a group of people, because they have their worldview, and you have to understand it as much as you can, to intersect it in a way where you might have some influence or effect. Anyway, that's the been a big part of the work in our building sustainability in the codes program that we initiated in the mid-90s. We saw it as a 3-phase program. That the first phase was helping people see the need for change, and the second phase was building the resources and building the capacity for change in us and also in the groups that we were trying to influence. And the last phase, which was continuous, is transferring leadership to the people who are actually having to make the changes, whether it's themselves or in their organizations. But, you know, not seeing ourselves as being essential in the long run, you know, really trying to influence what those groups we were working with, how they were viewing their work. And then, you know, my email little tagline for years was, the way to subvert the dominant paradigm is to have more fun than they do and make sure they know it. The last part is the actualizing part, because just having more fun is great, but if they don't know, if they can't see that you're having more fun, you know, then it's not likely to invite them in. So.
I think everything you said was pretty aligned with our keys to success through time.
Trathen, I have a few thoughts if no one else would like to introduce. Because Millie certainly touched an important issue, I think, for everybody. One memory, I got a story like David. When I was in my early 20s, I went to have my first public hearing. It was the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency in South Lake Tahoe, in the South Lake Tahoe High School auditorium in the summer. And they were considering, shall we have a building moratorium so we can sort of get a hold of what's really happening to this lake, which is getting silt into it, and it's getting algae blooms and things like that, and other issues of quality of the environment there. So I went, and in the morning, there were prepared speakers delivering to the Regional Planning Agency their positions, and that included the Sierra Club. And the bleachers were filled with people who were all youngish men, or maybe men of various ages. And I realized, oh, the developers let all their workers come to this hearing so they could boo the Sierra Club. And that was what was happening. And there was a break for lunch, and I went up and gave my name to the moderator of the hearing and said I wanted to make some public comment. And I had a very short message, but I said, you know, I think it's really important that we don't lose jobs, and I wouldn't want anybody to have to stop working. But the developers at some point are going to have to stop. And when that happens, they're not going to care about the workers anymore, because there'll be nowhere else to develop. And meanwhile, we will have lost a place that people love to come to because it's beautiful. That's why we come to Tahoe, because it's beautiful. And I was very happy that there was just a mild smattering of applause. Nothing big, but no boos. And what I felt was that to speak to what people's concerns are, but then to give, as David was suggesting, kind of the broader view, like, wow, the whole thing's going to collapse if we just keep doing what we're doing. And there's so many ways to approach that. And as soon as I finished the story, I did a much better job than I did years earlier, with much bigger, clear effect. But Sustainable Tucson does offer training that helps in this direction. We've got our ambassadors of sustainability that will start in June. And also we do occasional leadership seminars on, you know, how to do meetings, how to deliver talks in ways that get people interested and excited, and you know, how to use your communication skills of listening and joining with. So that's a pitch for some of our programs. I'll let Dwayne have the floor.
Well, I want to notice that there's a lot of the 4 letters SPIR, inspire, be inspiring, who inspires you, and the breathing, noticing your breathing. Breathing is respiring, and the quiet time and the meditation component. I'm trying to gauge how has there been for you a challenge in introducing these tools, I'll call them, or knowing the parameters in which they can be presented, and in a good way? Just maybe, I don't know my question yet. I'm still percolating it, but
I think you're clear. I get what you're saying.
is there anything that strikes in you that you can share?
Yeah, I think there's there's the data approach. There's some solid data. The corporate world's using mindfulness a bunch nowadays. There's the mental health, mind body medicine angle of understanding the biology of your nervous system in that. And so there's different, more scientific language that can be used, which sometimes circumvents the woo factor. It's definitely when during the fires, we were a week in the fires when Santa Rosa was on fire in 2017, and the head of the California Department of Water Resources called me urgently. He's like, Trathen, organize, reach out to the head of the Water Quality Control Board and get all these people in a room. I'm like, okay, Grant, sure thing. And so I started working on, and we got 30 agencies, grassroots organizations, fire chief, all kinds of help. People definitely never breathed probably like that way, or not publicly, in a room. It was the first moment I had in a week of intense fire response. Like everybody's just in like urgency overdrive. And so I started the meeting with that, how it landed, so there are those things where I've been more sensitive, but like it was amazing, like the common breath. I don't really think anybody breathed consciously for like the entire week. And so I've brought in it in edgier moments like that. I've gotten our city manager before a major decision at a city policy setting session to let me lead a little pause, like citing bestsellers about, there's a great book called When. I can't remember the author's name. It's a national bestseller, massive amount of data in it about like, if you went 9 a.m. versus 3 p.m., if you do an earnings call for a corporation, if you go before a judge, if you're getting checked for some sort of cancer, you never want to do that at 3 p.m. when people are tired and grumpy and all those things. You fail at it, like massive fail rates in the data versus 9 a.m. And so in that instance, it's like they were going to make a really big decision at 3 p.m. and we had been doing the big climate push. I'm like, we should have people stretch and do a breather and do something to recenter before it's a tense moment. The council's up there, the community's fired up. Like, let's ground people. This is a pretty important decision you all are coming to. And so I was able to use some of the bestseller and the data and that kind of thing in that angle. So I've used different approaches, and it depends on, we put our team through a mind body medicine training after the fires. There's a group called the Center for Mind Body Medicine. They've been on, I think, Oprah and everywhere, CNN. They go all over the world in all these communities, Palestine, after school shootings happen and fires. And they do this mind body medicine training on helping people functionally engage their nervous system so they could function properly. So they come with the deep sort of science of the body in that. So we've been on the steering committee of that after the fires. So we've done a range of things. Sometimes we've just like done it because we felt it's what's right and taken the chance. And other times we've tried to bring in, more of like, that's why I mentioned parasympathetic nervous system at the start of the talk. We have people do it more, but kind of, relative to the audience, you may want to think about how you can make a case, kind of like what David and Stuart said, that speaks to their listening, their understanding, their values, and start to create that culture change through time. Though I'll tell you, I did last year, I co-led a training. There's a coalition called the Green Cities Coalition in California, and it's made up of the sustainability and climate directors in about 15 small and big cities, San Francisco, LA, all over the state. And they asked us to do this training because they're super stressed out. Their jobs are phenomenally difficult. Their home lives are, kind of going to shit. And so they wanted mind-body medicine practices for them to sustain in their work. So we did that training. But what we talked to them about is like, this needs to be written into our climate policies. If we do not help people understand and be able to let into their emotional body the existential crises we're working with, we're not going to solve this. We're not going to make good decisions. And so there's like bringing these tools to people inside the system who wants it, but we're pushing that, like, just like you need to have consumption-based emissions in your climate plans, and you need to have regenerative water aspects, because it's not just about GHG emissions. Like these things that aren't in most climate plans, we need to address the mental health aspects of these crises, or we're not going to do what we have to do. So we got that written into our city's climate emergency framework. So there is, there's studying about it more, learning it more, to what framing you bring and how you bring into different audiences. But we're honestly, like I said, we're pushing to get this in policy because it's that important, like we're just not gonna solve this stuff otherwise. So long-winded answer. I think it's a really good question, and balancing knowing your audience and all that kind of thing, and where you want to push the edge and how you do it. You kind of got to read the situation, but I do think it's an edge that's worth pushing. Stuart's been doing it for a long time. I don't know if you have thoughts. You were getting county supervisors to meditate a long time ago, Stuart.
It was fun, and it was a special county supervisor, I will say. And what I find is that you just never know who's going to need what and when, and just to be as ready as possible for that moment. And that's where the kind of practice you talk about, Trathen, I wish I could take notes on, because you rattle off your morning program in such a fashion. I think, oh, that sounds great. I wonder what it actually is. But by doing that practice, whatever it is, your morning routine, then you are situated to be most present for that which is before you in the next moment. And that seems to be the magic part of the opportunities. There's that saying that good luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And they say that opportunity is always present. So as long as we're prepared, we can have good luck.
I think too, if we're building power and we're having an impact, like I've looked at Brock Dolman, he's like a Brad Lancaster character. And he is so brilliant, and he is such a next level ecologist and policy expert. He makes up words and does all kinds of crazy, funny shit. Like he could stretch the boundaries of what's acceptable because he is so good. And so for us, like our agencies in that, it took a long time. Originally, there was like, what's all this Inspira speak? We're engineers. But time after time, they're like, wow, they just mobilized 10 gardens and 100 gardens. They transformed City Hall. They changed our policy. They flipped our council. And so, the more you all and we step into the moment and build collective power and get more and bigger wins, and Trace gets his 1,000 dry wells going, it gives us a little more agency to kind of stretch the boundaries in some ways, because it's backed by some really big on the ground results. So I think that's another piece of the momentum building thing, starting small, little more. They start to just trust it. They're like, hey, you know what? If you're going to have us breathe, and that's part of how you figure out how to do all this mobilizing, okay, we'll go with it.
Well, it's as you said, that when the mind is clear and the mind is calm, then good thoughts come and good solutions.
Yeah, great question, Dwayne. But look at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, because they've reached major mainstream success on this. And they're brought into trauma situations all over the place. David, were you going to add something?
Yeah, and I think, David, we're at about sort of the wrapping up time here. So let's
just a quick thing that a little useful word that one of my mentors, John F.C. Turner, taught me years ago. The word is INPERT, INPERT. You have experts who come from outside with their expertise. And then you have the people of a neighborhood, a community, an organization, you know, a group of some sort that know history, backstory. They know why things are the way they are, that the experts typically don't know because they can't know. Sometimes you have inputs who are actually experts too. But a couple of times I've been able to use that word when I watched, as often happens in public processes, the experts kind of ride roughshod over the neighbors or the community people. And a couple of times I've interrupted that process to just introduce that term, you know, and to basically say, you guys are the experts and these people are the inputs. And they know things that you don't know, and they know things that you need to know to make good use of your expertise. And they can use your expertise if it's done in the context of where we are, who we are, what this history is. And what it does is it gives standing to people who typically don't have standing in community processes. And the other thing that I used it twice, this is years ago. One time the experts lit up the way I did the first time I heard that. I went, oh, wow, what a great concept. I never thought of that. The other time the experts got pissed off. And so it's also a very good tool to tell whether or not you have the right experts. But anyway, it's just a word. It's one of the really useful public process words that I've come across.
Yeah, and in equity work, like the lived experience, like when we got the Climate Commission founded, I'm obviously an aging white male, but we're very clear this can't just be stacked with aging white male experts on climate science. We need people from communities. The lived experience is their climate expertise of what it is to be a person of color in this neighborhood dealing with these issues. And so to really kind of normalize, kind of like what you're talking about, David, the lived experience of community members as well.
Shall we just open the floor? Is there one more person who hasn't spoken yet who wishes to just give us a final benediction or question? I'm seeing smiles and some nice pictures in place of some smiles. Trathen, we are quite inspired, using that word again, by what you've done, what you're doing, what you will do. And I believe you may have just stoked our fires all the more this evening, whether as individuals or as fully engaged members of Sustainable Tucson or other organizations, Watershed Management Group and such like that. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Stuart, I mentioned we're going to be sharing copies of the book. We got donated copies to share with grassroots groups for your, I believe, your ambassadors program. And then if anybody's interested, Stuart, you have a link as well. We have a crowdfunding campaign. If you wanted to get a copy of the book, you could donations of $35 or more, and then just make a note that you're from this talk and you wanted a copy of the book. And Stuart,
yes, I hesitate to go into the chat again, but we'll be past some of those other messages.
Yeah.
Down at the bottom, you'll see the link for Take Heart, Take Action. And second, it's about to come up.
Chat is disabled if that's what you're trying to do.
Oh, well, let's
you can
find
send
out.
it out later, Stuart.
Okay.
Trace has his
So,
hand up.
okay, Trace, go ahead.
Actually, it's me.
Paula.
Yeah. So this has been really inspiring, inspiring, that word again, in terms of just the variety of things that you can get grassroots people working on. It's actually a very nice lead into our February program, and I want to be sure that people know about that. our February monthly meeting is going to be on Valentine's Day. And it's going to be a time for us to really delve into our love for our Sonoran Desert environment here. We're going to have Carolyn Campbell, the director of the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection. And we're going to really want to think about what are some of the ways that we all can be even more involved in desert protection, in preserving our wonderful environment here, in having that as an important part of the community that we want to see thrive into the future, and find new ways to express our love for our desert environment. So that'll be February 14th at 6 o'clock.